Marshall men's soccer team actually won the national championship Monday. You go to Marshall yourself, and I'm from Huntington. I've been a lifelong Marshall fan. It was really awesome to see, their win on Monday, beating Indiana to win the national championship game. And something I kind of thought of, and the more I thought about it, the more you really can make a case for it. I think this win could possibly be Marshall's, not just their biggest soccer win, but arguably their biggest win in any sport in program history. Do you think that this win is their biggest program in history? Or if not, what game do you think it would be?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it definitely is in the conversation, and I actually might lean towards it actually being the biggest in history. Because this is the first time we've actually had a actual Division I NCAA championship win, I believe, ever. I could be wrong, but I believe this is the first ever time we've ever had that. And to see it be more, of course, it's modern. Indiana is practically the top team in NCAA soccer year round. They're always having great talent around there. It's a great team. And for Marshall to go in as a 10 seed in the NCAA tournament, preseason they were ranked number 1, so they were expected to be really good. End up disappointing a little in the regular season, but going into the postseason as a 10 seed and end up making it all the way to the tournament or to the finals and beating Indiana, a 3 seed, who is considered to be one of the best teams historically in NCAA soccer history, was really fascinating. And I was really happy to see all the guys be able to celebrate and be happy. There's loads of talent on that roster. I know a lot of players are going to go into the next level, going to pro leagues of soccer because they are extremely talented all around. And once they were able to get everything together, they really just kind of came together, and they really were the best team throughout the postseason for sure. I don't really think it was really close at that point. They were just super talented, super great defensively, especially not allowing any mistakes or goals allowed. I did think there's a couple of penalties and fouls that could have been cleaned up a little bit maybe, but offensively they were also amazing. And of course, the final goal coming in overtime for Jamil Roberts. It's overall a really good game for Marshall soccer, and I definitely think it definitely is up there in the all-time win category for program wins just in the history of Marshall sports, especially considering now it's modern. Marshall is slowly becoming more and more well known, I think, among media. We're still getting people watching, We Are Marshall or seeing them play football in Conference USA, basketball. We're seeing more people recognize sports, I think, as the years go on. And for Marshall to get the notoriety of being the soccer champions this year, I think is huge for the program and huge for the athletic department in general.
Yeah, being a Marshall fan my whole life, it was really cool to see them win a national championship. In any sport, that's something I never thought I would see happen. Not going to lie, we talked about before the show, that was pretty much my first ever game I watched of soccer. I don't know jack squat about soccer, but it was awesome to see them win. Do you think of Marshall, some people, who don't pay attention to college football much or sports, I was talking to somebody, they'd never even heard of Marshall before, which to me is just absolutely crazy. I mean, I know we're not the biggest school, but we're definitely not the smallest school. But when you think of Marshall, to me, the first things you think of are Randy Moss and just their football team in general. Because in the 90s, they were the most winningest team in the 90s of the decade. And I mean, you had, Leftwich in the early 2000s. I mean, 2011 to 2014, you had one of the most underrated quarterbacks of all time, and one of the most underrated college quarterbacks of all time, and Rakeem Cato. And we had Elmore a couple years ago with a tournament win against Wichita State. Marshall, they've been on the map for pretty much football the majority of their program. Basketball the last several years, but Marshall was actually their first tournament appearance in soccer was just a couple of years ago. Now, I mean, just 2 years later, they won a national championship. They beat the number 1 seed. Clemson. They beat the defending champs. They beat North Carolina, and it was basically a home game because the Final Four of it was in North Carolina. They beat Indiana, who, like you said, is pretty much the most accomplished soccer team in Division I history. I would say this is probably the biggest win in program history. We do have a couple of championships in other sports, like in the 1940s. They won a national championship, but at the time they were in the NAIA. That's pretty much like the Kentucky Christian, like half an hour away. I mean, very, very small school. Comparable to that, they won some 2 double-A titles in the 90s. The only game, in my opinion, that could even be close to this, and if somebody says this game is more important or a bigger win in the soccer game, I would completely understand. The only game, in my opinion, that you can even debate this is the win against Xavier in 1971, because that was the first win after the Marshall plane crash. Killed 75 members, faculty and players. It's the biggest sports tragedy in history. Obviously talked about, they made the movie about it, We Are Marshall. Lots of people, close to the team, and lots of, people, lots of family members of the players who died and everything did not want the team to come back. We noticed in the movie there was quite a bit of people who weren't really fond of having the team, come back so soon after a horrific plane crash. Just a couple of games, into their following season in 1971, they end up beating Xavier, 15-13. I know Xavier, they don't even have a football team anymore. And it's not like it's a win against a powerhouse. It's just the fact, you win and nobody thought you could. That you literally cannot get worse than a plane crash, and you've overcame so much obstacles and everything. You have that win. I would say this soccer game is the biggest win in program history. But if somebody says, that Xavier win is the biggest win in program history, I would have, no issues with that. But I really think that these two wins are the biggest, and I think it really is debatable for either one.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a great point, and of course, I think the Xavier win was not as big when it came to Marshall athletics when it comes to revenue. Like, that really didn't help out their athletic department anymore. Anyway, they were expected, if you're a college football team, if you're going to play for that college, you're expected to win games, and for them to finally win a game was huge for sure. But I think now that we are seeing Marshall athletics slowly become not only Division I teams, but also Division I contenders now. I think that is the huge step that they needed to take, and they finally taken it, and at least in the sport of soccer. And we've seen it in the past where they have some very good football teams, and of course last year they were fantastic up until the end of the season. Maybe it's going to start happening more in football. Now that you're starting to see these teams start to rise in the ranks a little bit, maybe this helps Marshall get a lot more notoriety. I know a lot of I've seen a lot of different rankings of like different tailgates and stuff like that. Marshall's getting up there in the rankings now. A lot of people are thinking Marshall sports deserves more hype, and I think of course this is only going to help that step further. I think the Xavier, having Marshall beat Xavier was a big step that was needed to take to really prove that this can still be a Division I college football team. I think that this win over Indiana in the finals of the NCAA soccer tournament tells me that not only are they going to be a team, they can be good teams. They can have good, successful teams that can be contenders at the next level. And I think a lot of recruits and people that actually want to go join Marshall Athletics, they're going to look at that. They're going to want to look and see what their accolades are. And now that you're starting to add more accolades to that list, it's going to be huge for this team. So I definitely think that, in my opinion, this might be the best win in program history for sure. I think that there were a couple of games that Marshall football might have been able to have. Like, let's see if they beat UCF in the bowl game a couple of years ago. Would that have been the biggest win? You could probably argue some of those games, but of course, Marshall ended up not winning those games. So they've had opportunities, but I think now that they have finally been able to win one of those big games that they really needed to, I think this is likely going to be the biggest win they've ever had.